Welcome to the Northwest Regional Library System for our Tuesday at 2 program. Gary Crowson is our expert with the beginning photography class. Stop using auto and have fun with the camera. And what I'll be doing is monitoring the Q&A. So if you have questions during the program, just type them into the chat. If you want everyone to see it, switch that to all panelists and attendees rather than just all panelists. But after the program, I'll go through all the questions for Gary. And welcome.
Okay, welcome everybody. I also glad that you're here and really enjoy the opportunity to be able to do this. One of the things I found in my life, and as you can tell, got a few years in there, is that most times I wanted to learn a skill, find something that I could do to improve it, but everywhere I went, there was this outrageous fee that came with it. And so I had to determine later on in life that if I ever get the opportunity, and if I know something, I think I know something well enough that if somebody wanted to sit and listen, that it'd be my pleasure to share my knowledge with them, and it wouldn't cost them a penny. So here we are now at the library and getting the opportunity to do it. Just for a little bit of history, I've had several paid classes, as I said before. And back in that, my wife and I have a small farm back in Alabama. And the local small town had a little camera course that you could take through the, I forgot now what it was called. But anyway, we took several of those courses. And then, but there was one particular person who taught those courses for free. Well, no, they were not for free. His name was Hank Siegel. And you don't know him, probably never meet him, but he's the one fella who stayed with me and kept me on the correct path to go and learn, because it is fun. Believe me, we're gonna have fun, but it's also can get to be trying. You pick up that brand new camera that you paid a little bit of money for or a hunk of money for, and next thing you know, this is not working. Where's the auto button at? And then that's what you use from then on out. Well, that's fine, but we need to learn how to use something besides auto button. And with Hank, he taught me those things because he would come out to my wife and I created a what we call a training room out in one of my buildings at the farm. And what we would do, I loved teaching Word, Office, Excel, photography. Whoever would come, we would tailor the course for that. And talking about having fun, the most fun we ever had, we were lucky enough to be able to teach 4-H. I'm sure y'all have, I know you have 4-H down here, but we were able to teach a 4-H class. And you're talking about joy and having fun when a kid gets a camera and he starts taking images, not just snapping away, and he creates or she creates the image, and then he'll show it to you and they got a smile about that wide on there. And that's when it's fun in photography. So most of the questions that I would always get is, why should I stop using auto? Well, we just kind of went over it. Your creativity is limited to what your camera is seeing, and that's fine. If I do that, what's the best camera? Well, that's kind of like asking the question, what is the best truck? What is the best car? Everybody's got their own. So the best camera that you can buy is the one that you can afford and that you will want to use. And what's the best photo you've ever taken? I always get that answer. And I always say the next one, because of all these I've taken, so my next one is going to be my best one. But I'm always looking for that. And, you know, the kids in the 4-H, they were, they didn't see any value in it except for having fun, which is really what the 4-H classes were about. So, but you're going to be surprised at the end of the course, I'm going to show you 2 pictures and what they sold for. These 2 pictures, and they were just, you're going to be amazed at what they are. But it's the fact that if someone will pay it, you'll sell it. Then it's not a hobby anymore, I guess. And we're going to start out with 5 pictures to show you what you can do if you get off auto. And the first one, oh, did you hear that camera click? Now look at this photo. I'm hoping this is showing up good, Sarah, on their monitors. Okay. Is this a nighttime photograph? That's here in Panama City, but was that taken at night? And here is one that I took a long time to get it worked out. That is me sitting on a bench at Gulf State Park Fishing Pier. And if you'll notice, it's a double image. First off, I have to take the picture with the bench empty, and then take the picture in between the snaps. Me run over there and sit down, snap happen, and take the picture. And then if you look real close, you can almost see all the way through me to the other end. So we had some more fun with that because I had to try to get it where nobody was walking on the pier. So that took a little over 4 hours. So that's a little quicker than just taking a quick off-toe shot. But finally got it. And I love taking panorama shots. This is a shot Hurricane Michael, of a long pier here in Panama City. And that is, I think, 9 shots combined together, which this day and time, it's amazing. Cameras will automatically do that for you. But I like to do it the hard way. 1 picture at a time, or image at a time. And then here's one that you may recognize. Of course, the folks back in Alabama won't recognize it, but this is Uncle Ernie's restaurant, pre-hurricane, and they had a little small 1-person little jetty that you could walk on the sidewalk there and walk out onto the water. And so my wife and I were in there eating one night. We placed our order, and I turned around and looked, and there was that scene. So as fast as I could get out the door and get to my truck and get my camera, I went back to the little outclay, and then was able to take that picture. I think it's like 7 shots of it and turn it into a panorama. That is a shot that you can take because you have the camera with you. The best camera, we talked in the beginning, the best camera that I can buy or I can have is the one that you have with you. So I'll kind of keep that in mind. Now here's another one. This is the last one of the sample shots. This is St. Andrew State Park, also at the fishing pier, and this is at nighttime. I do believe that the new iPhone cameras probably will take this picture because they have this new low light, the ones you pay like $1,500 for. But this is a panorama with the nighttime shot, and I have always liked that picture. Would not have been able to take that without the necessary equipment. Now, learning and enjoying photography, you don't want it to cost you a whole lot of money. You just want to enjoy it. Now, this had to be done with a tripod and use a timer on the camera, which the camera you have has a timer. You can actually set the timer, walk off, and get in the picture or get away from it so you don't move the lens. We're going to go over those things. What kind of camera can I use? You can use a point and shoot camera. When my wife and I started the 4-H classes, we had 18. So during that time, we in what I call the training room, we set up 6 computers and 6 monitors so we could have 6 at a time. So each week we had 3 classes. And of course, right off the bat, everybody brought a camera. Nobody had the same camera. So we decided we would just purchase 6 of these point and shoot. This is one of the actual one of them that we purchased. So they all would have the same camera. So when the class, we talked about the triangle of photography, they all could go to the same button, mash the same thing to get to those points. But learning the fundamentals of photography should be and is the most important thing that you can do. You can have a $10,000 camera and take a 10-cent image, or you can have a 10-cent camera and take a $10,000 image. If you know the fundamentals, you'll be able to do it. So I can use that, or I can use one of these, the DSLR camera. A lot more expensive. DSLR camera is a camera that you can change lens. You can take off one lens and put on another lens. You can have a 50 millimeter, or you can have a 400 millimeter. And this is true. The bigger the lens, the more money you need. Or, believe it or not, your camera now, your phone will take pictures almost without you thinking. But then again, these software that comes with your camera on your phone has the same fundamentals that we're going to go over today. If you know how, when you take your phone and you make a slight adjustment, then you'll be able to create the things that you want the image to be, not what it is. So speaking of the 3 legs, photography is always the fact of it being a triangle. So in the 3-leg idea of it, if you change one thing, let's say if you change the aperture, or you change the shutter, or you change the ISO, it will affect the other 2 legs. Each time you change one setting of one of the legs, it will affect the other 2. Now, you first thought, well, where's this stuff at? I don't see things to be able to change. This is where you have to come off from the automatic mode. And we could take a lot of time on trying to show you which camera, model, brand, whatever, you go and do this. That's something we can't do in this time span. But what we want to do here is learn our fundamentals. So the first one we're going to start with, which in the past, the aperture is kind of the hardest one to get in your mind correct, because really it's backwards. But we're going to step through it, and we're going to actually see some pictures that shows us what changing the aperture on the camera will do. So what is aperture? You notice I've got in parentheses there, f-stop. Well, for the first couple of years, I'd hear someone say, what's your aperture? What did you set your aperture on? And someone would say, what was f-stop? Can you change f-stop? I'm thinking, this must be 2 different things. And I can't find 2 different things on my camera. So it took me a while to figure out that the aperture and f-stop is the same thing. It's just some people use aperture, some people use f-stop. So what is an aperture? An f-stop. An aperture is the opening in a lens that allows light to enter. If you have a lens and it opens up, closes up, light's going to come in and out. But secondly, an aperture is the opening in the lens that blocks light from entering. It's just as important to know how to stop light from coming in as it is important to know how to bring in light. And 3, if you hold a lens up to the light and move the aperture ring, you'll see the aperture diaphragm open and close. Now, down at the bottom, the left-hand side of your screen, you see a f2.8. Well, that's f-stop. So an f2.8 f-stop looks like that. 2.8 is a small number, right? Sure is. But that's, I think, a big hole. So if that's true, if I come over to F16 and your cameras, depending upon the model and the brand, can have different ranges of f-stop or aperture settings. Some can go up to f32. Some can go f64. Again, it's how much you want to get to those ranges. But when you know the fundamentals, you know the three legs, you can make these things. I'm sorry you see me pointing, but I'm pointing at my monitor here. You can change these things and make them do what you want to. And so if f2.8 is on the left-hand side, and that's a big hole, and f16 on the right side, small hole, which one's going to let in more light? Well, it's obvious to see f.28. So to see it in action, let's watch as he turns the aperture lens ring and how it opens and closes. There we go. So he's changing it by hand, and that's exactly what we would do on our camera by hand, except it would not be quite like that. We would be mashing buttons or clicking up, up and down arrow. But all that's fine. I still don't understand very well what is aperture and what is f-stop. What does it do for me if I change it? All right, as we view the following photos, keep your focus on the picture behind the flower vase, or where I come from, jar. And to help me to remember what f-stop is, does, and so I can remember that, I like to think of an f-stop or an aperture as the higher the number, f-stop, the further I can see details, but I will need more light. So if I have a higher f-stop, more details being seen, but I got to have more light, because remember, the higher the f-stop, look at that small hole. So I got to have more time for light to come in. So we'll go back to our slide and notice now the picture behind the vase. On the right-hand side, you notice there's a little cardboard box standing, and it's got something written on it. We can't see what it is. Now we're going to change the aperture, okay? F-stop. We're not in auto now. We're shooting in aperture mode. On your camera is aperture mode, time value mode, and different companies call it different words. And then ISO mode. Those are the three things that's part of that is and part of our triangle. So, and if you notice too, on the bottom of the screen there, I'm putting up a little icon that keeps in mind what the f-stops are. We know f2.8, we know f36, we know f whatever, but what is it? So as we go through these pictures, kind of relate to what the picture's telling you that the f-stop is as compared. So first one we're going to have is shutter's going to be open for 1/10 of a second. See a whole lot of changes? Not much. So for 1/10 of a second, the next shot we change now the f-stop, shutter speed, because we're shooting not in auto, but in aperture setting. So now we changed our aperture setting to 6.3. But notice the time. The time has gotten slower. Then notice the picture back behind. Still getting a little trouble to see any changes, especially when you get to be 70 years old. Then we're going to go to the next shot. We're going to change our aperture to f8.0. Look at this, the shutter speed, 1/250th of a second. It is getting slower and slower because we need to let in more light. Now you see the picture on f.8, the picture behind the flower is getting a little bit more in focus. The picture on f11, which is 1/500th of a second, still beginning to get a little clearer. So it's obvious that we use our f-stop to see out in the distance. So we go back to the original saying, I had to have a higher f-stop to see details further out, but I'm going to need more time to see it. So here we're at f16. Now the shutter speed is 1 second. Believe me, in the world of camera shutter time, 1 second is a long time. And we notice also now that the picture behind the flower is beginning to get more clear. In the left-hand corner at the bottom of the picture, you can almost see a name written there. And the brown box on the right-hand side, you can now read what the letters are. Now, F22, look at the difference. F16 to F22, look down at the bottom. If F16 is that small hole, just imagine how small the F22 hole is. So we know for sure we need more light. To get more light, we need to keep the lens open longer. So it's up to 2 seconds. Now, go up to F32. I think it's as high as my camera will go. Look at the picture behind the flower now. You can tell that's a wagon. And you can see my name down at the bottom. And if you look at the brown box on the side, you can completely read it. So it's holding true for us that the higher the f-stop, the further I can see, but I just in detail, but I need more time to do it. So on the right-hand side is f5 at 1/10 of a second. Left-hand side is f32 at 4 seconds. Look how much difference there is. And if you're taking a landscape picture and you want everything to be in focus, tells you now how you need to set your camera. Okay, and also in reverse. Let's say you want the object of attention to be the flower and the jar or vase. Then you're going to use F5 because you want this stuff blurred behind the main object. So that's how you shoot what is called depth of field. And if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you see our little chart of our f-settings, f-stop settings. Whenever you hear someone say, and you know, that's the problem I had for a long time. I was hearing too many different words for the same thing. Once I learned that what it was, I was okay with it. Wide aperture is the items on f2.8, f4, blah, blah, blah. When you hear someone say, oh, my aperture, my f-stop was in mid-range. Well, that starts at between f8, f7, f8, so on. And then when they say small aperture, f16 and higher. But look at the blue line on the chart at the bottom. Shadow depth of field, or DOF. What is DOF? Depth of field. Again, we go back. To be able to see everything in focus further out, I need to have a high f-stop, but I gotta have more time to do it. So the shadow depth of field, which is what you would shoot if you wanted the thing behind your subject to be blurred. And then as you go from left to right and go up into your small aperture, you get more and more depth of field. Okay, so that's the hardest one of the three legs because it's right the opposite. You think f2.8 is going to be a small hole, right? And f16, it's going to be this big. And until you really think about it and get that worked out into your mind, but the best way is take time, take your camera, go set you up something like this, and take the shots. And then look at them, see the difference in what they change. So we finished up on aperture now, and now we're going to step to shutter speed. What is shutter speed? Shutter speed. Shutter speed is a measurement of the time the shutter is open, shown in seconds. What's a shutter? The shutter is when you press that button down to take the picture. Not all cameras, you have mirrorless cameras. We can't get into all those different things now, don't have enough time. But let's say not a mirrorless camera, then you have when you mash it down, most cameras, when you mash it halfway, it focuses. You probably heard that. Mash it halfway, let it focus, then mash it all the way down. And then you hear it click, or like you heard the sound in the beginning. So that is a shutter. And when that happens, a curtain comes down, exposes the shutter, the unit behind the shutter, the memory, and then when it happens, and it opens, the light runs in, hits the chip on the back of the camera, bingo, it closes. That's it. Now, can you change that? Yes, you can change it because you also have, not in auto, but in shutter speed mode, or I think Nikon is TVL. One of the things, I just don't remember what all they are right now, and I should, didn't do it. I was going to have my camera here just to show you. But it'd be in shutter speed mode. You would turn your dial that you're not in aperture mode anymore. Click, then you're in time value mode or shutter speed mode. And so, well, how can I change all that? Well, shutter speed is shown in fractions of a second or a whole fraction, like 1s. That's 1 second. That means when you mash that button, don't care how slow you mash it, don't care how fast you mash it, that shutter is going to be open for 1 second. No doubt about it. Then you have half seconds. Then you have quarter seconds. Then you start breaking down even faster time, 1/20, 200, 2/50 of a second, 1/500. In other words, the faster the shutter speed is, the easier it is to photograph the subject without blur, or you can freeze motion, and the smaller the effects of the camera shake. Because don't care what anybody tells you, you can have a $10,000 camera. When you mash that button down and your shutter opens, all that movement makes that camera move. A lot of folks will tell you when you get ready to take your picture, hold it down halfway, get your focus in on it, hold your breath, and then mash it on down. Well, all that works, but not as good as you being able to set the time itself. When you can set the time, you will control whether there's blur in the picture or the image, or whether you froze the image. We're going to have some pictures here in just a minute, because knowing this stuff and hearing this stuff and reading this stuff doesn't make any sense until you actually see what it does, how it changes things. So I see the shutter speed numbers. What do they mean? How do I read shutter speed? Okay, shutter speed is written as a fraction of a second. We had that in our last slide. A quarter represents the shutter will be open for 1/4 of a second. What's a second? I mean, it's over with. But the camera is able to take and divide it into 1/4. 1/500th represents a shutter will open for 1/500th of a second. I do good to count seconds, let alone anything else. And one, you see the one represents the shutter will open for 1 second. You'll be surprised, and I was one of them. Someone told me, set your shutter speed for 2 seconds. I didn't know where 2 seconds was on my dial. I went running up and down trying to find a 2. And I kept seeing that, the little quotation marks. Now, I'm not trying to make myself look dumb, but I didn't relate that that was a second. That one with the quotation marks is a second. A 2 with quotation marks is 2 seconds. My first thought was, I'm sure that most people have in the past when they're new at it, is that an inch? Is that 2 inches? 3 inches? So when I was able to finally get some help and figure that out, whole new world opened up, because now the lens could be open for a much longer period of time. Remember the nighttime shot on the pier where we saw the moonlight, we saw stars. And of course, the one thing that I have not pointed out, when you start getting below of a shutter speed of 1/30th, 1/30 of a second, you must have a tripod or something to put that camera on and to stabilize it. Because at 1/30 is the breaking point of you'll start having your image being blurred, because the camera just, it's got to be stationary. Here are some, now Sarah sent out the PDF file for all this for you. And this here are some examples of what different shutter speeds are used for. So you'll have that, and you use it to have a starting point. So we'll kind of move on here a little more. So here's some sample pictures of shutter speeds. Now this left one is what's known as light painting. Fun to do. Light painting is, in this case here, standing in my garage with all the lights off, and all I had was a flashlight going around with. I've seen people write their names. Seen people who can really do good and draw things, an animal or something. But look at, I always try to, any learning picture I have, I always try to put the information that I had on my camera. If you see my F/13 says my aperture setting, my f-stop was f13. The time, shutter time, 20 seconds, and my ISO, which we're going to get to next, was set at 100. So if I know that information, I can duplicate that every time. So my next shot was this one here. I really like. It just doesn't show up good in prints, but I really like it. This is the fishing pier at St. Andrews State Park after they put in the turtle lights. This is f1.8, 20 seconds, and my ISO is 100. Now the white spot on the left of the picture, out there right above the ocean line, that's the moon. Now we talked about shutter speed of freezing things and things being blurred. Usually what most shutter speeds are used for. This is a picture of Eden State Park, just west of Panama City Beach. And this is the water fountain at the house itself. So I wanted to take a picture and I wanted to freeze the water droplets. Wouldn't be able to do that if I was on auto. I mean, it would just, it would freeze it, because don't know for sure. But I wanted to do was freeze the water drops. And so my settings were that I finally worked out on my camera was f5, 1/400th of a second, and my ISO 100. Now this here, okay, it's the same fountain. I didn't move. I just changed my camera setting, and I caught and blurred the motion of the water droplets. And so f36, 1/2 of a second. The -3 f-stop, we won't get into that, but I did have to go to -3 f-stop to be able to stop it from being so dark. But that's the beauty of learning this joy of being out of that automatic mode. The automatic mode would not have made that picture. It would have made a picture, and it would have been beautiful. Then, to be able to show how things can be blurred, I wanted to be able to, create a photograph that would do that. And so what I've done here, this is a person in motion. And of course, it's my fingers, but you see what I try to do. I try to put a relationship to what we was trying to do, plus some kind of miniature stuff that kind of put it to scale. So the blurred walking fingers was shot at f/18 for 5 seconds, -1 stop. I shouldn't have brought these on, in ISO 100. There's the same picture. This time, I wanted to walk and not be frozen. So here I am at f2.8, 1/10 of a second, the -1 f-stop, and then ISO 100. Okay, so that was the samples of our shutter speed. And we're kind of rushing a little bit, and I'm sorry about that, but now we're going to go into ISO. I don't start out with ISO, but it is the easiest one to do. But ISO, and again, we won't sit here and read through all this. Sarah has provided, and one more thing too before I forget. When I would go to these seminars or go to these training classes and pay, 9 times out of 10, I walked out with nothing. No paper, if I didn't remember it, I didn't learn it. So I've always said, if someone will take the time and spend their time with me, I will give them what we discussed and we learned in the class when they walk out. So again, we won't go through all the technicalities of the ISO, but on the left-hand side there's another little chart there that kind of gives you what ISO does. ISO, simply put, is the sensitivity of the light coming into your camera. And ISO 100 is considered slow. As we go on down, 16,000 is fast. What that means is if ISO 100, and some cameras, some Nikon cameras have 50, their lowest point is 50. If I'm out shooting and it's bright sunlight, and it's so bright I got to squinch my eyes to be able to see, that means I can shoot on ISO 100 because it's slow. It will bring in more light. If I go to 6400, those numbers, 1600 and up, you start getting what is known as, forgotten the word now, little speckles in it. It'll come to me here in a minute. And cameras now are a lot better. They used at 1600 grainy, what I'm trying to say. If you shot a photograph at 1600, it'd be so much grain in it, big little white dots, like little sand. It just wouldn't look good. Cameras have gotten better, especially phone cameras have gotten better with correcting that. So here we're going to go. We're going to take actual slides and take pictures of what we've done, and by changing the ISO, we're on a dial now where it says ISO. So we're going to be shooting in ISO, we'll be changing numbers. So this is a photograph, and we're going to take a picture of it by changing only the ISO. I didn't move, I didn't change anything, I didn't add more light to it. It just is what it is, but then I changed the ISO, and it was set at 100. Now, kind of dark, isn't it? You might can make out what that is, you might not make out what that is. I know what it is because I was there. And so here now, I went over to and changed the ISO settings on my camera to 200. See the difference? Getting brighter. When you change the ISO, you multiply it by 2 each time. So now I'm at 100, 200. So I changed again. So I went from 200 to 400 because in the ISO world, it ups it 200 each. I'm sorry, it doubles it. 100, 200, 400. So double the ISO is being affected. That's 400. Getting a little bit better, right? There's 800. Getting to the point now to where may not look too good. So I go to my next one. You know how it was 800? Now we've doubled up, 1600. Getting kind of bright. Don't want that picture. And notice now, we double again. This is your camera doing it. You cannot change this. It's doubled each time. 3200. Look at all the grain. You see the little black stand there behind it? How all that grain is showing up? You don't want that in your photograph. And so my camera will go to 6400. And that's what 6400 looked like. Where would I ever use an ISO at 6400? What it used to be in the old days with film, you would go and buy a film that was 6400, 100, 800. Your whole roll of that film that's what it was. So now with us shooting digital, we can shoot all day long and it costs us nothing. We just keep changing. So if I were to go back and want to get a good picture, good image of the items that I see here, which one would I probably use? I would be shooting somewhere around that range. And now, since I don't have to take the film out, take it to the drugstore, wait 3 days and go get it, I can immediately see I need to change my ISO, or I could change my aperture, or I could change my shutter speed, the 3 legs. Okay, so now we've gone and we finished our ISO. This is not part of the 3 legs, okay? This is called white balance. You're going to be totally amazed at what your white balance does for you in your picture. We will step on through here. Again, since you're having a printout and you can sit now, you also on that printout, you have my email address. And if you get hung up on something, send me an email. We'll talk on the phone, however we have to do, till this virus goes away. That there can't be any meeting and helping, but maybe we can work out your problem by email or on the phone. Now, your phone, when it came from the factory, was set white balance auto, A-U-T-O. You can change the white balance on your phone. If your eyes sees this slide, it sees that. Your eyes see this as white, not the green smiley face or the blue lettering, but the background. It's white. Whenever the camera sees it, this is what it sees. Everything is 83% or 81, or 80, I think it's 83% or 84%. The camera sees everything as 84, 83% gray. That's why you see the gray. Now, while you're viewing this, I will caution you here. Every monitor that you're viewing these next slides on, they each have a different tint to them. So what I'm seeing gray. You may see something not quite gray. And that's just because of the monitors that you're seeing it on. They are not all the same. You can have a monitor and you calibrate it so blah, 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 everything is, but that's one that costs a lot of money. And then the software costs a lot of money. I know that's great, so I'm happy. So the camera, when it's set on automatic, sees all that white right there. The camera sees it as gray. So let's say you've heard people say, well, what's your auto, your white balance set on when you went out and took this picture? I don't know. Well, was it on auto? I don't know. Let's see. That's what the camera should see, is those two on the sides. But now, tungsten. Believe it or not, people go in the factories. I've taken shots in factories to where they had fluorescent lights and tungsten light. Tungsten light is like your regular everyday home light. Of course, now not like it is this day and time because they're LEDs, but a regular light, and that's how the camera. And usually, tungsten light is 32,000 K. We don't have enough time to go into explaining what the temperature of light is. What makes these names match these colors is the temperature of the light itself. And so when you and you can put your camera on tungsten, that's a choice. You just click it on there. But every time you take a picture, the image is going to have a hue, a color cast as gray and blue. So everywhere white is, that's what it's going to look like. You should see that with the camera, and you do. Camera sees that. Sunshine. Now, would you not think that if you went outside on a bright sunny day and you had your camera set to sunshine, that you would see white? But you don't. Your camera sees that yellowish, orange, yellow tint. That's okay on some photographs, and some just a photograph is it's no good. And so now cloudy. You would think you went outside on a cloudy day, it'll have a blue tint to it. It is for me and you, but the camera has an overall orange tint to it. So that's another way of changing your picture. And that may be what you want. You may want your picture to have an orange tint to it. And that's how you can get it. Now, talking about fluorescent, same thing a while ago, fluorescent. And then that's what the fluorescent sees. Again, I'll remind you that the monitor that you're using to view will not always be the exact color that everybody else is seeing. But it gives it, instead of see the white on both sides, it gives it a yellow-green tint. Okay? Now, fluorescent H, and I was going to look up and failed to do so. I'm not sure where fluorescent H lighting is. If you get time, and I'll look it up when I get time too, or if you do it before I do, shoot me an email. Tell me. I may be afraid of that and don't know it. So we have that. Now, questions and answers. Now, again, that's back to one of our panorama shots. And now here we go. We had our snap of a shutter speed. Now, again, I want to thank you all for taking your time, your valuable time, and coming to this. And hopefully we've learned something, to help us in the future. And there's my email address there. Welcome to send me, good or bad. And but I told you I was going to tell you what a photograph is. When I told the 4-H kids that they take this course, they pass it, and then in the future, 40 years from now, if they sell a picture, how much, I had them to write down how much they thought they could sell it for. Well, of course, they were nowhere near this. But I kid with them and said, if you do that, I want 10% of it. Because the first class you took in 4-H photography was with me. But that's called Rhine 2. You know what that is? That's Pacific Ocean shoreline. Some guy paid $4.3 million for the photograph. That ain't the highest one. This is why we all should learn to get into photography. This is called the Phantom, a black and white photograph. Someone paid $6.5 million for it. So in closing, go out, learn to shoot, play, have fun with it, and every shot does not have to be perfect. Shoot it again if it's not right. And Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, we do have some questions,
Okay.
And we can stop the share screen if you would like.
Okay.
Or keep it on, depending if you want to hop back.
I better leave it
That might
alone.
happen. Yeah, that may happen. Okay, so the first question we have is, Just to clarify whether a smaller f-stop opening requires longer time for the shutter speed to have everything in focus, correct? So if it's a small f-stop,
Yeah.
you're going to want longer time.
Well, if it's a small f-stop, it's a high f-stop, say F36.
Yes.
Small hole
Yes.
requires more time to be able to see further away.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
that's
small
correct.
opening. Okay. The next question is there any photography clubs in the area? And I've
I
only
have,
heard of one.
okay, which one?
The Panama City Photography Club. I know
Uh,
that they sometimes would do shows at the Lightroom, but I think they have a
oh,
Facebook page.
oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
I'm not sure on how you join, but I
Uh,
would follow them on Facebook, the Panama City Photography Club, and ask someone from there.
okay. Well, hopefully, if we get rid of all this virus, we'll get to pick. We had a club at the senior citizens called Picture Perfect. That was the name of our club. So if they'll send me email, and then if it ever gets start back up, hopefully it will, I'll contact them and let them know.
How did you kind of pick up some of the tricks for nighttime? Because nighttime photography is really challenging.
Yeah,
How did you kind of get into that?
just going and shooting and just changing because once you take the picture, if you have the basics down, you know what you need to do, but it may take 7 changes, of each one, not of each one, but of one till you get the picture you want. And then I have a little book. If it worked today, it'll work tomorrow.
So that you have your notes.
Yeah, what my final settings were.
Kim says, thank you. I learned a lot and have played with the camera and found some really cool features I didn't know. Great presentation. Robert says, are any future photography classes or discussions in the future? Do you have
Oh,
any
love it.
plans?
Whatever you let me
I
do.
know we may have another library program in the future. So stay tuned. Just stay tuned to what we're doing in terms of our Facebook page as well as on our website. So when we have another one planned, it will be on there. And Barbara asked, what makes the Phantom photo so expensive?
Good question. If we knew that answer, we'd be selling them for $6.5 million too. I don't know.
And sometimes it can just be the artist as well. That can change it very quickly.
Yeah,
A name can add some zeros.
yeah, I have his name. I didn't put it up there. He's overseas in Europe.
Okay, it's a
And
beautiful piece.
yeah, and like the design, I mean, I'm sure that this was not just walk by and took a quick snap. He had to design what he wanted, and it's a little spooky to me, but that's beside the point.
And I have one more question for you. Do you have like a mode that you as your standard mode? So like if you're just getting started, is there an ISO, shutter speed, and aperture
mode.
that you kind of start as your standard?
Okay, aperture mode, F8. There are rules that we just didn't have time to get into called shooting the moon. There are rules,
Okay.
shooting the sun, but aperture mode, start with it, learn everything about the aperture mode that you can. But the middle is F8.
Anything else you want to share with us?
I really appreciate it, and y'all have a wonderful organization there. And when they hook up and see your past videos like this, I didn't know there were all that till this happened, and I've gone back and watched a lot of them. So appreciate y'all coming. Appreciate you spending time with me, and go out and shoot.
That sounds great.
Okay. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Thank you.